Buying a business in the United States may seem complex, but once you understand the process step by step, everything becomes much simpler and more secure. In this video, I will explain the main stages of acquiring a business in the United States, from the initial conversation through closing and transition. The first step is always an initial conversation. We meet in person, by phone, or via Zoom to understand your goals, your available budget, and the type of business you are looking for. At this stage, we recommend that the client begin the process of forming a company, which will be the legal entity responsible for acquiring the business assets. Once the criteria are defined, we register the client to receive weekly information about all businesses for sale that match their profile. In addition, the client gains access to the full portal of businesses for sale in the state of Florida, further expanding their options. When the client identifies a business of interest, we provide a preliminary report containing key, non-confidential information about the company. This material allows for an initial evaluation before moving forward with a deeper analysis. If the client wishes to further analyze the opportunity, the next step is signing a non-disclosure agreement. The non-disclosure agreement is a standard industry requirement that allows sensitive information to be shared. After the non-disclosure agreement is executed, the seller provides detailed information about the business and, in many cases, a formal presentation including financial and operational data. At this point, the client can gain a much clearer understanding of the company. Following the preliminary analysis, if the client is interested, we structure and submit a formal purchase offer. This offer defines the price, terms, timelines, and key conditions of the transaction. If the offer is accepted, the buyer submits a good faith deposit, typically between 5 and 10% of the purchase price. This amount is deposited into a fiduciary account known as an escrow account, where it remains protected until closing. At this stage, a corporate attorney or closing agent is engaged to conduct the legal diligence, prepare the transaction documents, and coordinate the closing. The buyer then determines, based on our recommendations, how their due diligence process will be conducted, whether by hiring an accountant, inspector, or other professionals, depending on the type of business. During this period, the buyer may withdraw from the transaction, with or without cause, without any penalty. The deposit is refunded in full immediately. At the conclusion of the due diligence period, the client decides whether to proceed with the acquisition. If the client chooses to move forward, all parties are notified and the closing date is confirmed. If the client decides to withdraw by the final day of the due diligence period, the deposit is returned in full. Once the decision to proceed is made, the attorney begins preparing the final closing documents. The parties receive a detailed settlement statement outlining the transaction calculations, and the buyer wires the remaining funds required for closing. On the closing date, the official transfer of the business takes place, and the buyer and seller begin the transition and training process, ensuring continuity and operational stability. Important to note that if there is financing and/or a lease transfer involved, these items need to be incorporated to the workflow and timeline of the transaction. If you are considering buying a business in Florida, contact us. We are here to guide you through every step of the process.